Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Chira Bhanachari Yamuna Chira Bhanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Chira Bhanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupad Brahmanjali Rajakacharya Astadhar Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Prantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru, Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Namam Chai. Whoops. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Vidhirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, we should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 27, Attack by Chandavega on the city of Paranjana. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Text number 10. Teshu tadriktahareshu griha koshanu jivishu nirudena mamatvena Vishayeshvan babadyata Teshu tadriktahareshu Griha koshanu jivishu Nirudena mamatvena Vishayeshvan babadyata Teshu tadriktahareshu griha koshanu jivishu nirudena mamatvena vishayeshvan babadyata
Eshu tadrikta hareshu Riha koshana jivishu Nirudena mamatvena Vishayeshvan babadyata
Eshu tadriktahareshu
Eshu tadrikta hareshu
Yakoshanu jivishu
Riha koshana jivishu
Udena mamatvena
Nirudena mamatvena
Vishayeshvan babadyata
Vishayeshvan babadyata Deshatadriktahareshu Riha koshana jivishu Nirudena mamatvena Vishayeshvan babadyata.
Word meanings. Teshu, to them. Tat riktahareshu, the plunderers of his money. Griha, home. Kosha, treasury. Anujivishu, to the followers. Nirudhena, deep rooted. Mamatvena, by attachment. Vishayeshu, to sense objects. Anvabadyata, became bound. Translation: these sons and grandsons were virtually plunderers of King Puranjana's riches, including his home, treasury, servants, secretaries, and all other paraphernalia. Puranjana's attachment with these things was very deep-rooted. Purport. In this verse, the word rikta hareshu, meaning plunderers of wealth, is very significant. One's sons, grandsons, and other descendants are ultimately plunderers of one's accumulated wealth. There are many celebrated businessmen and industrialists who produce great wealth and are highly praised by the public, but all their money is ultimately plundered by their sons and grandsons. In India, we have actually seen one industrialist who, like King Puranjana, was very much sexually inclined and had a half-dozen wives. Each of these wives had a separate establishment that necessitated the expenditure of several thousands of rupees. When I was engaged in talking with him, I saw that he was very busy trying to secure money so that all his sons and daughters would get at least 500,000 rupees each. Thus, such industrialists, businessmen, or karmis are called mudhas in the Shastras. They work very hard, accumulate money, and are satisfied to see that this money is plundered by their sons and grandsons. Such people do not want to return their wealth to its actual owner. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 5:29, Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam Sarvaloka Mahishwaram. The real proprietor of all wealth is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the actual enjoyer. So-called earners of money are those who simply know tricks by which they can take away God's money under the guise of business and industry. After accumulating this money, they enjoy seeing it plundered by their sons and grandsons. This is the materialistic way of life. In materialistic life, one is encaged within the body and deluded by false egoism. Thus one thinks, I am this body, I am a human being, I'm an American, I'm an Indian. This bodily conception is due to false ego. Being deluded by false ego, one identifies himself with a certain family, nation, or community. In this way, one's attachment for the material world grows deeper and deeper. Thus, it becomes very difficult for the living entity to extricate himself from his entanglement. Such people are graphically described in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 16, 13 through 15. In this way, if you want to chant them all together. Idam madhyamaya labdam ibam prapsye manoratam idam astiram mam bhavishyati punardanam asau maya hata shatrur hanisye cha paranapi ishvaroham aham bhogi siddhoham balavam sukhi adyo bijanavan asmi konyosti sadrisho maya Yakshe dashyami modhyasya ityagyana vimohitaha. The demoniac person thinks, so much wealth do I have today, and I will gain more according to my schemes. So much is mine now, and it will increase in the future more and more. He is my enemy, and I have killed him, and my other enemy will also be killed. I am the Lord of everything. I am the enjoyer. I am perfect, powerful, and happy. I am the richest man, surrounded by aristocratic relatives. There is none so powerful and happy as I am. I shall perform sacrifices, I shall give some charity, and thus I shall rejoice. In this way, such persons are deluded by ignorance. In this way, people engage in various laborious activities, and their attachment for body, home, family, nation, and community becomes more and more deep-rooted. Om Jnanatimirandasya Ginanjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svabhatandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shiyuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raguratam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Rishabhanu Sute Devi Punamami Haripriye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhivacha Utitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Translation again. These sons and grandsons were virtually plunderers of King Puranjana's riches, including his home, treasury, servants, secretaries, and all other paraphernalia. Puranjana's attachment for these things was very deep-rooted. And Prabhupada begins with this significant word. Prabhupada says, Rikta Hareshu. Rikta means wealth, actually means inheritance. And Hareshu means to take away. We saw how Prabhupada, in the verse and in the purport a number of times, Prabhupada said this attachment was very deep-rooted. I thought about Krishna's statement in the Bhagavad Gita in the 15th chapter, the banyan tree is this upside-down, perverted reflection of the material world. And the branches go downward, and it's a very what do you call it, labyrinth. It's a very deep rooted. And Krishna says that one has to cut down this tree with the weapon of detachment. And what is it? Mamatvena. Nirodena Mahatvena. Deep-rooted attachment. Prabhupada says this bodily conception of false ego, this is the root. Rupa Goswami says that the holy name, form, quality, and pastimes of Lord Krishna are all transcendently sweet like sugar candy. Although the tongue afflicted by the jaundice of ignorance cannot taste anything sweet, it's wonderful. And simply by carefully chanting these sweet names every day, a natural relish awakens within his tongue, thereby his disease is gradually destroyed at the root. When Raghunath Das Goswami finally was extricated from his material entanglement, Lord Chaitanya said, Lord Krishna's mercy is very powerful. It's the strongest thing. And it's because you've received Lord Chaitanya's mercy, you've been able to withdraw from this entanglement of materialistic life, which Lord Chaitanya says is compared to a hole in which a person passes stool in. Pretty graphic. But Lord Chaitanya said it, so we have to follow the parampara and repeat the words of the Lord and his representatives. So, when you go to Vrindavan, I remember it was just shocking, the culture shock, just to see all the animals everywhere. And I was fascinated by the sanitation department. There was some guy with a stick and he was herding the pigs around, and they would just go for the gold. All the filthy stuff, and it was, there's a lot of references to the hogs in the Shastra, because these are the most, how do you get any more degraded than that? A stool eater. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says that the desire for respect is like eating the stool of a hog. So we can imagine how, if your diet subsists of eating stool, you can imagine the hog stool is pretty nasty. So Bhaktisiddhanta says desire for respect is comparable to that. So kind of puts, I remember one time Rana Swami was in Mayapur, and he was the way he spoke, he said, and this petty desire for respect. Petty desire for respect. And this is the disease, the false ego. I want to be recognized. I want to imitate Krishna. I want to be somebody who I'm not, And Maya is so powerful that we're so tiny and insignificant, yet we can still parade around thinking that it must be recognizing, how wonderful I am. But when Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita there, that strong, the demoniac persons, I was thinking how, does anybody really walk around thinking that? Like consciously? And maybe not, they're maybe not verbalizing it or in their mind, but it's subtly, that's what everybody is moving towards, that kind of mentality. Let me rise above others. Let me climb the corporate ladder. When Japan at the Dai Nippon printers it's a famous story where they were negotiating Prabhupada was such an expert negotiator. And they were negotiating a new price for the printing or something. And he kind of frazzled all the board members or whatever. And they kind of excused themselves to sort of work it out. And there was one young executive who remained in the room to kind of be like an attendant. And Prabhupada interfaced with him and said, so what's your goal? And there were the business cards of all the different board members were sitting on the table, and the young executive took all the business cards and stacked them up, and then took his own business card and put it on top of the stack. So this is my goal. And so yeah, maybe not overtly, people aren't necessarily walking around, but at least within their heart, people, they want respect. That old comedian Rodney Dangerfield, his whole shtick was, I don't get any respect. And Lord Chaitanya says, Nadanam, Najanam, Nasundarim. And I thought about the 3 R's: riches, romance, and respect. Danam, Nadanam, Najanam, respect, followers, and Nasundarim, romance. These are the perennial, or they're always going to be. I remember there was one time, I think it was Lokanath Maharaj, he was saying, same old story, profit, fame, and glory. Another one bites the dust. It's the same old story. And so many, even exalted personalities, Lord Brahma, Indra. I mean, you've got to have some pretty good sukriti, to be Lord Indra. And they became overwhelmed by pride. Lord Brahma was challenging, how is Krishna? God, he's just playing with the cowherd boys, how is Krishna? Let me test him, so it's so wonderful that Lord Brahma, because once he was humbled by Krishna's manifestation of his potency, when he manifested all the cowherd boys, ultimately towards the end of the Leela, when they manifest his Vishnu forms, and Lord Brahma is his mind is completely blown. And when he finally becomes humbled, he was so concerned that he would lose this consciousness of being a humble servant of Krishna, that he prayed to Krishna, like, in my next birth, let me take birth in a very lowly position so that I won't forget, your supreme. So then, Brahma took birth as Haridas Thakur in Chaitanya Leela, and was born in a outcast family, or not even outcast, a Muslim family. And, but this is, it's so funny. It's so counterintuitive to material consciousness. Advancement in spiritual life is the more I'm at the bottom of the list, the higher you are. Like, the more you feel yourself the servant of the servant of the servant, you're actually in a position is most exalted. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, Shuddha Bhakata Charana Renu, Shuddha Bhakata Charana Renu. What is that right now? Shuddha Bhakata Charana Renu. Okay, anyways, it's the dust of the lotus feet of pure devotees is conducive to devotional service. Bhakata Seva Paramasiddhi, Prema Latikara Mula. Mula means root. So he says, the dust from the lotus feet of pure devotees is conducive to devotional service, while service to the devotees is itself the supreme perfection. And the root of the tender creeper of divine love. And mercy flows down, and the example is given like water, water will seek the lowest level. So mercy flows downward. The more one is situated in humility, the more mercy we get. And again, it's counterintuitive. You think, well, how does that work? It seems like to be, again, this, rising up, putting your card on top of the stack. So I thought maybe we could meditate a little bit on some verses that, because this weapon of detachment that Krishna says is required to cut down this deep-rooted tree, there are various verses. I'm thinking of the Bhagavad Gita verses in the second chapter, but does anyone have any verses that come to mind how one can develop detachment? Because here, Paranjana is deeply rooted attachment. This is the problem. So maybe we could just fluff out a few verses that talk about how we become detached and what's the result of detachment.
Are you thinking about Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita?
Bhagavad Gita. But I mean, any verses. I mean, there's so, it's such a fundamental topic, Lord Chaitanya, Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga, he came to teach knowledge and detachment and his own devotional service. So it's one of the three primary things. He came to teach knowledge, detachment, and devotional service. So it's a pretty significant theme in our philosophy, detachment.
From the Bhagavad Gita verse, I think of in regards to that, developing the attachment that inspires me regularly is Mamcha Yoga Dicharya Bhakti Yoga one who engages in consistent devotional service, not falling down under any circumstances. He transcends the modes of material nature and comes to the level of Brahma. And so one of my teachers in Mayapur 2 years ago said that, if we follow Prabhupada's program of do the morning program, take prasadam, distribute books, do some service, do something in the evening for Krishna. And in that way, if you just follow simply, then you can overcome the modes of material nature. Simple thing. But you become attached because you're engaging in.
Yeah, I think Lalita, you were talking about in your class about attachment to Krishna is the actual way that we become detached. Gauranga Prema, any verses about detachment that come to your mind? You're detached from detachment. I was thinking of how, because the real root is desire. There, I mentioned it in the old Macmillan Gita. There was this picture that shows the spiritual world and then the material world, the perverted reflection, and it's the what do you call it? The dividing line is desire. And in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says, "Jyayato visham pumsam sangasteshu bhajayate, sangat sanjayate kama." By association, one's desire develops, and from that desire, sangaste supajayate, you become attached. And that's the whole idea of advertising, get people thinking about jayato vishayam pumsa, the sense objects. And now everything's derivative Prabhu insanity. Instead of chewing the chewed, it's viewing the viewed. There's a screen everywhere now, because it's like dangling, sense objects and then all these banner ads that come on, after you search for something, and then suddenly all these ads, and they usually have a picture of whatever that item is.
Well, I have two things I wanted to say. One is that happens all the time in the dry room. I'm trying to listen to, like Church Rita or something like that, all dressed in the beauties, and then, without a doubt, here comes some glaring commercial, for a car or for, some restaurant or something. It's so frustrating. The verse I was thinking of, is it? I mean, I think it's about detachment, which is, 1866, right? Which is abandon all the rights of religion and surrender unto me. I shall protect you from greatest fear, right? And what is that greatest fear? That's attachment, right? Because we're attached, we're going to keep coming back, right? So, Krishna is saying, surrender to me, and you don't have to worry about that. I'll protect you from that.
Thank you. You just helped me remember a verse that I was going to try to integrate into this, but Krishna in the 4th chapter, text 10, he says, Vita raga bhaya kroda manmaya mamupashrita. How does it go? Anyways, it's being freed from attachment, fear, and anger. Having faith and taking refuge in Krishna, he says, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me and thus attained transcendental love for me. And it's that's raga, that attachment. What's that verse? Yeah, and that's the verse. Vita raga bhaya kroda, attachment. So there's that verse in the 3rd canto, I think it's Kapila Deva, and he's...
That one?
Is it the one where it is said that, attachment to the temporary is a cause of bondage? Same attachment when applied to the devotees of the Lord. You become attached to the sadhus because the sadhus are carrying Krishna within the heart. There are access. We can't access Krishna directly. He lives within the heart of his pure devotees. So, Yasya prasada, Bhagavat prasada, without, how is it, by the grace of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. And the very first, Garbhastaka prayer is that the spiritual master's receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy. And Krishna is Karuna Sindhu. He's an ocean of mercy. And again, Lord Chaitanya said that the mercy of Lord Krishna is, there's nothing stronger than the mercy of Lord Krishna. And it was because of that mercy that Raghunath Das Goswami was able to extricate himself. So, our whole process is mercy, is receiving blessings from great souls. And it was Narada Muni who received the blessings of the Bhaktivedantas, to be, in his previous life before he appeared as Narada. It was the blessings. And, the whole idea of the false ego, I'm the doer, it's by my effort that I'm going to try to, climb out of the material world. Although our effort is required. Was it Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur? He says about the 2 fingers and Mother Yashoda trying to bind Lord Krishna, the 2 fingers too short every time. Those 2 fingers represent, one, the devotee's endeavor and Krishna's mercy. So we demonstrate our sincerity, not just through knowledge or renunciation. In the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada says that knowledge and renunciation may help one get a footing in Krishna consciousness, but they may ultimately need to be set aside because it's dependent only on the sincere desire or sentiment for devotional service. And Prabhupada says it only requires sincerity. And So desire, it all comes in when Prabhupada was asked, why is Maya so strong? And Prabhupada said, because your purpose is weak. If your desire is in line with Krishna, and Krishna's merciful, Krishna can pull us out in a flash, in a moment. It's just a question of our own desire. And that, again, is primarily, we cultivate that, or we develop that desire by association, by serving. Mahatsevam varam ahura vimuktes. The doorway to liberation is opened by serving great souls. And Rupa Goswami says, how do you serve? Most importantly is that you hear from them. And then I was talking with my friend in California, we call him Harpananda. And he had a little breakthrough last night. It was good because he's been struggling a lot. And he said, our conclusion was, you just have to do the best you can. That's all you can do. Like, Krishna's not asking for us to be Prahlad Maharaj. I mean, they are our shining lights, the great souls. But we're not supposed to necessarily be them. They're Prahlad Maharaj is a Mahajan. But if we become the servant of these great souls, then they will bless us with their spiritual, their strength. What is it? What is spiritual strength? Is being able to tolerate. Actually, it's said in the Krishna book, in the pastime of Bhrigu Muni, testing the different devas and ultimately kicking Lord Vishnu in the chest, and Lord Vishnu's unfazed. And Prabhupada writes, one's greatness has to be estimated in one's ability to tolerate provoking situations. I mean, there may be some spiritual emotions that await us, but primarily the indication or the measuring rod of our spiritual advancement is our ability to tolerate provoking situations. Trinadapi Sunitena, Tarori Vasahishuna, be like a tree, tolerant. And that strength comes from the spiritual master. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his song Guru Dev, he paraphrases Trinadapi Sunitena. He says, Guru Dev, with a drop of mercy, make this servant of yours more humble than a blade of grass. Give me the strength to bear all trials and troubles, and free me from all desire for honor. And he says, please invest in me the power to honor all living beings properly. Only then will I sing the holy names in great ecstasy, free of offenses. And Kirtan Yoga's class on Saturday was great when he was talking about, we should pray specifically to have the Lord remove some anartha that we're dealing with. Like he said, it's nice, we want a desire to go back to Godhead, or to, we have a desire for Krishna prema, but first things first. First we have to become free from our anarthas. So I really like that Kirtan Yoga was sort of, and I called him afterwards later in the day, and I said, that was a really nice point you made about, and he said, and Kirtan Yoga in his classic humility, he said, yeah, because otherwise we may think we're on this other level, I'm just playing for Krishna prema, So, hey, how about first becoming free from pride? And that's this whole verse that Prabhupada references, that string of verses. It's all this pride. I'm the enjoyer. I'm so powerful. He's my enemy. I've killed him. All these, and as I say, pride precedes the fall. The higher you climb, the farther you have to fall. It's like, so it's just amazing. Like when you I've heard so many times, you know, the Trinadapi Sunicana is so important. It's so, you know, it's the most important instruction in the Shikshastika. Because without that humility and tolerance and freedom from the desire for honor and giving respect, we can't chant properly. We can't chant offenselessly. And as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, please invest in me the power, that strength to honor. Give me spiritual, we pray every morning to Prabhupada, Chakudan Giliye, you know, give me the eyes. And it's not, we're not seeing with our blunt eyes. We have to see through the eyes of the Shastra. And because we can't see properly with material, we can't see, you know, it's that Shastra Chakshus to see. So when we have we have an ardent desire to become free from our entanglement, and when that's our focus, that I want to get free from this illusion. When Krishna sees it in Gaur Gobind Maharaj, he says, you have to cry, like you got to want it more than anything else. I need to become free from this illusion that I'm in. And you cry with every, you could say, ounce of, you know, as much intensity as we can muster up. Then Krishna hears that cry, and then he sends you the appropriate person to and it's because the Paramatma hears our cry in the heart. So then the Paramatma manifests externally as the spiritual master. It's Paramatma. It's a direct manifestation of Krishna. And this is something that I heard when you were in Mayapur. Bhanu Swami had given that class and you had asked a question. And there's a thing called academic integrity. You know, you have to look at the whole body of teachings. You can't just focus on one. So Prabhupada made statements about even one is not liberated if they're following the liberated person, they're acting on the. But Prabhupada also said, manifestation of Lord Nityananda, and he's or a confidential associate of Srimati Radharani. So they're both true. It's not either or. It's like, okay, one's not liberated, but they're following the liberated, you know, you're safe. But it's also true that there are genuine liberated souls in the world, and it doesn't mean they're eclipsing Prabhupada's preeminent position. But there are pure devotees of the Lord who are situated on very, very exalted levels of consciousness, who can bless us, either present physically or because no one dies. No one dies. So the acharyas, all these great souls, they're all accessible to us when we follow the proper etiquette, when we surrender to our Diksha and Shiksha gurus. You know, it's like we have an all access pass, you know, to all the great souls, all the great acharyas. And it's by their mercy that we get spiritual strength. You know, it's, you know, when we call out in desperation without pride, like, I can't do this, Lord. This is, and what is the determination of the sparrow to dry up the ocean? It was, Prabhupada says, the impossible task. It's an impossible task for us to get out of Maya without Krishna's mercy. And that mercy comes through the pure devotees. So becoming attached to the great souls, and primarily through hearing. Rukmini, became attached to Krishna just by hearing about him. So this is, emphasized again and again and again, here, 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 here. And yeah, so it's almost like, not that we're fanatical in an unhealthy way, but we, in a sense, we have to be like really eager to hear. Like, by Shakespeare, he says, keep the transcendental sound vibration going. Like there should be always, and if not audibly from some device, in your mind, there has to be, no matter what we're doing, if we're doing a physical activity, there has to be transcendental sound vibration going on, that association with Krishna directly in the form of his holy name and his shastras, and always thinking of me. It's a practice. One time they asked Radhanath Maharaj, I think it was Yudhisthira, this big devotee, and used to be in San Diego, I don't think he's there anymore. He was appreciating Radhanath Maharaj, and he said, like, how did you become like who you are? And Radhanath Maharaj says, how do you become good at anything? Practice. You have to practice. Practice thinking of Krishna. It's and it's like when you're practicing guitar, they have this thing called muscle memory. Like when you practice something enough, you're not even really thinking about what you're doing. Your hand is just sort of doing it. And then you can actually kind of get into an emotional state, because you're no longer just processing okay, now I got to move this finger to that fret. You're, in a sense, you're freed up to enter into more of the emotional aspect of it. So when we become practiced, it becomes, the mind becomes a friend, becomes our friend. It's sort of like, that's our default. The mind is, it's just a practice. The mind is just, it's a material element. And if we practice engaging the mind constantly and thinking of Krishna, then the mind becomes purified, and it just becomes like, hey, this is good. I like this. And then the mind is no longer like our adversary, where we're constantly like fighting with the mind. The mind becomes our friend and is like our assistant. He's like, we have to preach to our own mind, like Raghunath Das Goswami, the Manashiksha, he's preaching to his mind. So it's like our most important preaching is to our mind, is to make our mind a devotee, and then we've got good association. If we can make our mind a devotee, then we've got like really good association all the time. And then the mind will be like constantly reminding us, verses going through our head, or the Hare Krishna mantra. It's just like the mind is just, now it's our friend. It's no longer our enemy. And just takes practice. Any other realizations? Comments? Yes, Prabhu.
That was a nice class, Prabhu. Thank you. Incredible class. Like this point about being eager to hear should be shushu. My question is, so many nice points to make, but just this question came up in my mind that Raghunath Das Goswami, Lord Chaitanya says, you've received the mercy to become free from material entanglement, but it appears that my state of renunciation is more entangled than Raghunath Das Goswami's state of so-called material entanglement, because his parents were devotees, and his family were devotees. Actually, they were very pious religious people, and he had a beautiful wife and whatnot. But it appears he was situated on a much higher mode of goodness than I am, as a brahmachari. So what are we to do about that? Because we want to become detached, but it appears that even like we feel like we're detached, we're not detached like Raghunath Das Goswami is detached.
Thank you for the question. Bhakti Vigan Maharaj and Jayapatak Maharaj, they were in San Diego in like consecutive weekends, I remember once, and Jayapatak Maharaj says, first you have to become attached before you can become detached. Detachment from, he said, like if you drive by, Wells Fargo or Bank of America and you say, I renounce all this money, it means nothing. It never belonged to you in the first place. So, real renunciation, just to say, I'm giving up something that never belonged to me, it doesn't make any sense. And, real renunciation is to see everything belongs to Krishna and to engage it in Krishna's service. To see our family members as devotees of the Lord, even if they're not actively pursuing devotional service, they're still a devotee of the Lord. They're just in an unmanifest state. And we have to be cautious, about our association. We don't embrace the tiger, even though we recognize they're a part and parcel of Krishna. But I found it interesting that when Lord Brahma, in the Leela with Brahma Vimohan Leela, when Krishna manifests himself as the cowherd boys and calves, and both the parents of gopas and the cows, they became more attached to the form of Krishna as their calves and boys. But then after Krishna reinstated their original cowherd boys and calves, the cows and the parents became that much more attached to their own children and calves. So the more attached we are to Krishna, the more attached we will be to all Krishna's parts and parcels. Like when we have love for Krishna, we'll actually have real love for all Krishna's parts and parcels. And therefore we'll want to, engage them in devotional service. And, depending on our level of advancement, sometimes, I think it's in the Nectar Devotion in the beginning, when Prabhupada said, in the beginning, one may have to remain aloof from sense objects. If one's very addicted to some type of sense gratification, you might have to remain aloof just to, because there's just too much, the false ego's too tied into. But when the false ego is purified, then you should be able to engage with everything and everyone. I mean, that's the level of Mahabhagavat. Even the Madhyamadikari, they avoid the asuras. But on the platform of Mahabhagavat, they don't see anybody as even a demon. They just, everybody's a devotee except me. And Prahlad Maharaj, Yudhishthira Maharaj said, he was appreciating, he was having some darshan with Narada Muni. This is in the Nectar of Devotion. And Yudhishthira Maharaj was appreciating the character of Prahlad Maharaj. And Prabhupada says, this is the sign, or this is one of the signs of one being a pure devotee, is that they don't think themselves very great. They think all other devotees are greater than them. So Ralph Waldo Emerson said, in my walks, every man I meet is my superior in some way. Therefore, in that, I learn from everyone. So, everybody can teach us something if we have the right attitude that, Krishna, and then we won't be so, our detachment will be because of our attachment to Krishna and because we see everyone as a devotee of Krishna, and appropriately interact with them. But that's real renunciation. But in terms of Raghunath Das Goswami seemed to have. What was the point? You were saying that, my background seems to be much less
Well, it's like he's
advantageous.
He's renouncing the world. He's renouncing materialistic life, yet his state of materialistic life is much more renounced than a lot of, than our state of devotional life so much of the time. He's renouncing to he's renouncing what we're trying to get to. Just being pious.
Yeah, therefore we have Varnashram Dharma. There's a gradual, Prabhupada said 50% of my work is incomplete. We have to be honest where we're at and not try to imitate a level of renunciation that we can't, maintain. God, there was something that's just coming in my mind. I forgot what it was. Ganapati Swami once, I remember this was in Chicago, I remember it very clearly. It was a heavy verse about sex life. This whole thing with Paranjana and sex life. It was a heavy verse about sex life. And back in those days, it was like, all right, sannyasi's going to give it. He's going to tear into everybody, sex life, spit at the thought. And Ganapati Swami was like, that was like in the mood, like when you were a young brahmachari, it's like, come on, yeah. And all the verses we would memorize are all these heavy verses about, So Ganapati Swami, we were all like, licking our chops, like, okay, Maharaj, give us the. And he just he said, yeah. He said, the real problem is subtle sex life. Everything moves from subtle to gross, profit, distinction, adoration, It's the root of it. It's just overtly manifest in gross sexual attraction, and then sometimes, you have to peel that layer back sometime, in order to get to the real problem. It's like a drug addict, there may be some underlying cause for their addiction, but first you have to stop the addiction. Before you can get to the underlying cause, first you have to stop the bad, behavior in order to get to the root of the problem. So first we have to stop our sinful activities, come to the mode of goodness so that we can even think clearly. But then we have to address the real issue. The real issue is false ego. And falsely claiming proprietorship. That's the whole idea of detachment, is you're recognizing who the real proprietor is. And otherwise the renunciation is called palgu vairagya. It's meaningless. It's false renunciation to say, it doesn't belong to us in the first place. You can't renounce something that doesn't belong to you. So real renunciation is to recognize that everything is connected to Krishna. Prabhupada writes that precipitates one full surrender when you see that there is nothing that is not connected to Krishna. That's a prerequisite. In order to fully surrender to Krishna, we have to see that there is nothing separate from Krishna. And Prabhupada said, you think you're sitting on the floor, I'm sitting on Krishna. Krishna's within everything. He's externally everything, the material energy. He's within everything as the super soul. There's nothing that's not Krishna. And Krishna's supporting everything. Everything is resting like a pearls on a thread, And Krishna tells Arjuna, what's all this detailed knowledge with a single fragment about myself? I support and pervade the entire universe as the super soul. So I was speaking with Jaya Jagadish and said, what is this? What does it mean? Realizing the Paramatma is the chit feature, knowledge. Because Brahman realization, is the level of detachment. When you realize you're not your body and there's no more hankering or lamenting, but the Paramatma realization is that I'm realizing that Krishna is present, at least partially, in this form, and all pervading in the form of the super soul. So knowledge necessarily means you have to be conscious of Krishna. otherwise, we're so kind of used to thinking of knowledge as some sort of, cramming data into our head, but in the items of knowledge that Krishna describes in the 13th chapter, he says it's a disposition of character, and it begins with humility. That one is conscious of Krishna's presence everywhere and within everything. Then you're going to change your behavior. You're going to be very respectful to all living beings. You see everyone is a part and parcel of Krishna. You see the Lord is present within everybody's heart. And that's the Madhyama stage of Nishta. Is that, Trinadapi Suniti, then Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that verse represents the stage of Nishta, where you're respectful to, you're conscious of Krishna. At least, and the principal anarthas have been extinguished. And there's still, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, there's still some smoke remaining. Like, you put out a fire and there's still some smoke. So a devotee reaches a state of Nishta. Occasionally they may behave inappropriately, but it's just like the smoke of a fire. The anarthas, the principal anarthas are extinguished, but occasionally a devotee will do something that's a little weird. But the principal anarthas have been extinguished. And then when you get to the higher levels of even like Baba and stuff, then they're completely eradicated. But it's a science. All right, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Panchakalpatarubhishta kripa sindhivya vacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnava.